Hello, noble ones. Welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. Now, today I would like to talk about medieval treaties. Particularly, I would like to talk about half-swording. Now, I've been browsing through some medieval treatises lately because I wanted to kind of understand more in details half-swording, and I have found some things that I would like to talk about that also, because I've also been watching a couple of videos and I think that I would like to share my opinions on this matter, try to get to the point as quickly as possible. To begin with, the first point I would like to make is, what would be a realistic scenario where I would actually choose to half-sword? Well, first of all, I think that a possible scenario would be, for example, let's say that I were a medieval knight and I was in my place, my home, my castle, and all of a sudden a lot of armoured knights come into my home because they want to raid it, they want to plunder, and I wasn't prepared. I see my family being killed, I don't have time to wear my armour, and I get the closest weapon that I have, which is most likely going to be my sword. So I get my sword and I rush to defend my family and defend my property. Now, that would be a situation where I would probably find myself attacking an armoured opponent with a sword, because honestly, if I had enough time to get proper equipment, apart from the fact that I would clearly wear armour myself, but even if I couldn't, if I have just a little bit more time, I would get either a mace or a warhammer. I would not use a sword. Yes, of course, through half-swording you can actually deal some decent damage, and you can even win the fight if you're skilled enough. However, I think any mace or any warhammer would be a much better catch, because that's what they were designed for, and this is what you're trying to do when you half-sword, particularly if you switch to murder stroke. Having said this, so let's say I'm in a situation where the only weapon I have is a sword. So what do? Of course, against a plate armoured opponent, we understand that just trying to slash and cut him, it's just incredibly ineffective, and he's probably going to kill me immediately if I try to do that. So I can try to half-sword this way, or even this way, if we want to consider some treatises, they show this, other treatises show this. I'm actually gripping the sword, so I could do this to get increased precision and try to get through in the gaps of the armour. I could try to use it as a pole weapon, and even try to disarm my opponent, as it's shown in several treatises, for example gladiatoria treatises of 1435. Or I could go for the murder stroke and actually making it become, because using the pommel or using the quillons, I could actually make it become an actual percussion weapon, a blunt weapon. Now, if it was me, I appreciate all this and the precision, but I would definitely go for this. I would try to get as much momentum as possible, try to get through a gap in the opponent's guard, and then try to smash him in the helmet as strongly as possible. This is what I would try to do all the time. That's just me, personal preference. And then after I manage to do that, if I do manage to do that, then I would switch to this. Perhaps he's stunned because of the hit in the head, regardless of the helmet, because we know that it does work. And then as that happens, that he's kind of dizzy or sick perhaps, then I would try to get my point into the gaps of the armour, even if he has got very good protection and I can't really get to his throat. I could still damage a joint, I could still penetrate and for example wound him in one of the arms, which would mean that even if the fight is not over, well, I've got now a huge advantage over my opponent, which would kind of even the situation, considering that a full plate armoured opponent is in an extreme advantage against an unarmoured opponent, because we have to consider that yes, I would be a little bit more agile, but honestly, if he's been training in armour his whole life, it's not going to make any difference at all in an actual duel. He's still going to be quick, he's still going to be over the place, and he's still going to be effective and quick with his strikes. So perhaps not as quick as me, but it depends again on the situation, it depends on who is fighting who. So that's what I would do. If he loses the ability to use the left arm, for example, then it would be a lot easier to just keep on bashing on his head, or actually switching to this and trying to wound him even more severely, so that eventually would actually bleed to death, or he would have to just run away to save his life. So this is what I would try to do. Now, One thing that I would not do if I were the armoured knight is to half sword. There is absolutely no point, in my humble opinion, that is. And the reason for that, if I half sword, what I gain is precision, okay, so it's easier to choose my target, and again, as we said, armor penetration type of thing, so I can kind of get through the armor with blunt weapons, with blunt attacks. Now, my opponent does not have an armor, so I think it's a lot more effective to simply stick to standard grip and try to cut him. Also, not only because all I want to do is just to cut him anywhere, honestly, because it can get infected, it can bleed out. I mean, lots of things could happen. I could incapacitate him a lot. It's a lot easier to incapacitate an armoured opponent just simply by cutting than it would be by actually hitting like this. But also, most importantly, I don't need to get as close. And the thing is that if I'm wearing full plate armour and I see that my opponent is half swording, I understand that he knows what he is doing. So if he hits me with a murder stroke, I'm in trouble. So that's what I want to prevent. And if I start half swording myself, well, I need to get close, particularly if I start to do this, okay? The chance of him actually hitting me is higher. And what have I gained? What advantage have I got? Nothing as far as the damage I can deal is concerned. Instead, if I just go for standard grip, I can keep him away, and it's very, very easy for me when he tries to go for the murder stroke to just step back and stab him, or stabbing in the arms, or even cut him. So armoured against unarmoured, no half swording, makes no sense. Unarmoured against unarmoured, what about that situation? Again, I can't say that in the treatise is not found, because it is. There are lots of situations and pages in the treatise that show both unarmoured opponent half swording. But honestly, my opinion on this is that I think they were just, that representation is just showing to people practicing half swording in an event where they would actually face an armoured opponent. Similar situation. Why would you want to change your sword, which is already an incredibly effective weapon, in a duel against an unarmoured opponent, so an opponent with no armour, into a blunt weapon? It would be like switching from a sword to a mace, and it makes absolutely no sense. A mace is an excellent weapon against a person wearing full plate armour, but if you're fighting against a person who has got a sword and no armour, and you go in with no armour and a mace, you're at a huge disadvantage, because you need to either, to incapacitate him, you need to either hit him in the head or, well, hit him in the ribs, something like that. Whereas the person who's got the cutting edge, he can just cut you everywhere, and that's going to be a huge problem to continue the fight if I got a cut bleeding, okay? Not to mention that in the Middle Ages, medical treatment could actually heal. They knew how to heal broken bones, but they did not know how to deal with infections. So again, if you're trying to cut, your opponent is actually going to be a lot more concerned than if you're trying to half sword against him. So again, in that situation, I think that they were just practicing the techniques, and that's why they were both not wearing armor. But in an actual situation where if they were actually dueling, they would have just simply used standard grip. That's my take on it. So one point that I think is crucial to all this is a similar situation with a knife. Now, again, that's my personal preference, but if I were to fight against a person who had no armor, I would go for standard grip. That's the way I would fight. So I would just try to cut as much as possible, maybe just use some feints and just try to open as many wounds as possible, also to discourage him to continue the fight. If I can manage even to cut him over here, for example, in the head, even if it's not a fatal wound, all the blood would just blind him, and lots of other things could happen. But if I were to fight against an opponent wearing full plate armor or even mail armor, I would switch to this grip, because this one gives a lot more penetration, and I can actually get through the rings, not through plate armor of course, but through the rings. It could be done, depending on the situation and depending how much force I can get. But I would not use this grip against an opponent who was not armored, because there is just a certain amount of angles that that my attack can come from, if you see. Whereas, anatomically speaking, whereas with this grip, my attacks can come from all over the place. So that's why I would go for this one. Alright, I hope that you enjoyed this brief video, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.